it's Stephanie, and I'm really excited today because I am going to be talking about my favorite books of 2016. This is a video I have been really looking forward to making and really looking forward to coming up with the books that were my favorite. So I do have 10 books for you. Starting from the bottom, my 10th favorite book of the year was Fanny Flag's Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe. I read this earlier in the year for book club, and I'm really surprised that this made it on my top 10 because it's that really kind of heartwarming, feel-good brand of chick lit that I have learned I have a soft spot for. Just, you know, really heartwarming stories that are not about romance. I tend to like stories that are about friendship and female friendship, and this just fit the bill with both of the storylines in the two different timelines kind of being about that overall theme. A lot like the movie, there is a few big differences, but the movie, like, I still enjoyed watching the movie after reading this. And there's recipes in the back of this book. And I have made the pecan pie recipe twice, and it has been a huge hit, so win for me. But yes, loved this book. First line, June 12th, 1929, cafe opens. The Whistle Stop Cafe opened up last week, right next door to me at the post office, and owners Iggy Threadgood and Ruth Jameson said business has been good ever since. Then coming in at number 9 on this list is Kate Atkinson's Life After Life. I read this a few weeks ago, so I haven't talked about it on my channel yet, but I have really enjoyed this book, and I was scared about getting into it for a long time because of the size of it. It is so big, but I paired it up with the audiobook, and it was a great decision. I loved this book. This book, if I had to describe it, I would say it is Groundhog Day meets Atonement with a little bit of Inglourious Basterds thrown in. In this book, the main character, Ursula, you find out at the beginning, she kind of has this mission to kill Hitler, and she kind of keeps living her life over and over again. You're assuming kind of until she gets that right. And it was so interesting. You see all the different trajectories that her life takes. You know, sometimes she dies as a child, sometimes she dies at birth, sometimes she follows these paths, you know, all the way down, and it is really interesting. And Kate Atkinson, you know, revisits the same chapters and the same events over and over again. Like every time she's reborn, you know, we go back to that day. Every time she's reborn, it starts with like snow, 11th of February, whatever year. But all those chapters seem fresh every time because she focuses on a different thing, and it was very interesting. This was surprisingly easy to read, and I fell into it real quick and was very excited and got through this in a very surprising amount of time. So yes, I really, really recommend this book. Loved it. First line, November 1930. A fog of tobacco smoke and damp, clammy air hit her as she entered the cafe. Okay, not like super interesting, but the rest of the book is, I promise. Coming in at number 8 is Karen Russell's Swamplandia. This was a book I really, really enjoyed. If I had to describe this, I would say it is a dark, whimsical coming-of-age story about the Big Tree Children who try to save their alligator wrestling family theme park in southern Florida after the death of their mother. So this is, like I said, a very dark coming-of-age story. I keep using the word dark, but it had that dark, whimsical feel that I really love, and I've really fallen in love with Karen Russell's writing, and this was just very hypnotic. Just the quality of the writing I thought was absolutely beautiful, and the stuff that was going on and the dichotomy between all of the different storylines was great. I absolutely loved it. First sentence, the beginning of the end. Our mother performed in Starlight. Whose innovation this was, I never discovered. Coming in at number 7 is a book I have reviewed on this channel pretty recently, and that is Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. This is a horror story about a teen girl's exorcism that's filmed as a reality show and the repercussions of that, you know, on society after the show is aired, on this particular family, and it was absolutely fascinating. This is, like I've mentioned, a horror book for horror lovers. It was just very self-aware, a lot of great commentary on the horror genre, and specifically on the like exorcism genre. It went over a lot of the tropes that are used in that genre, and I really liked the devices that were used in telling this story. There was a horror blog that was used, and it does a lot with a character explaining what happened during that time, and it plays with memory and the accuracy of memory. I thought this was absolutely fantastic and probably the best horror book I read this year. The first sentence is, This must be so difficult for you, Meredith. Coming in at number 6 is In the Woods by Tana French. This is the first book in the Dublin Murder Squad series. I loved it. I don't read a lot of detective series books, but this one just really grabbed me. It was very interesting. I listened to it as an audiobook, and when it got close to the end, I was like pacing at work. I was freaking out. There was so much suspense going on, but it was such a wonderfully written novel. Such a fresh take on like the classic detective story that I loved it. The whole series is very character driven because each book focuses on a different character, and it was fast paced. And like I mentioned before, I loved the writing. The first sentence is, "What I want you to remember is that I am a detective." Coming in at number 5 is How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents by Julie Alvarez. This is a novel told in interconnected short stories, told in reverse chronological order, that follow the Garcia sisters' loves, lives, and losses. It was absolutely fascinating. I loved all of the sisters that we follow. I thought it was very interesting that you start in the present and that you go back in time and just go through everything that they've gone through, all the different sisters and their relationship to their parents as they were children and as adults, and you really get to see the difference in all of that. I do plan to read more Julie Alvarez this year because this was fantastic. The first sentence: "The old aunts lounge in the white wicker armchairs, flipping open their fans, snapping them shut." Coming in at number 4 is Meg Wollitzer's The Interestings. This is a novel about friendships, ambition, talent, and art, and what happens to them over time. I loved this book. It follows a group of friends when they meet at an art camp in the 70s, and they just become this very tight-knit group of friends. That friendship evolving into the friendship they have as adults, and how it changes, and how the successes of some people in the group of friends affect the others, and jealousy and ambition and talent, like I mentioned. And I just thought this book seemed so applicable in the day and age of social media. I loved that it was so focused on all of these characters. They seemed very fleshed out and very real. Absolutely fantastic. First sentence: "On a warm night in early July of that long evaporated year, the Interestings gathered for the very first time." Coming in at number 3 is Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. This was a haunting and lyrical novel inspired by the real story of Agnes Magnusdóttir, who was the last person to receive capital punishment in Iceland. This novel was absolutely beautiful. That's not a spoiler. At the beginning, you find out right away that she is basically sentenced to die and sentenced to live out the rest of her days helping out on this farm. You're basically just awaiting her execution. The beauty of it and the stark landscape in Iceland. This is a great book to read in the winter if you're looking for a winter read. My God, the writing in this was absolutely beautiful. First sentence: "They said I must die. They said that I stole the breath from men, and now they must steal mine." Coming in at number 2 is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is an elegant post-apocalyptic novel about survival and the importance of art. I absolutely love this book. I read this, I think this was one of the first book club books I read this year, and it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. I loved the writing. I loved the way it was told in the 3 different timelines. You kind of have, it's about a pandemic that happens that wipes out most of the population basically on the planet. And you have 3 timelines, one that is during the pandemic, one that is showcasing life before, and one that is 20 years after. And all 3 of those timelines are connected to one night in the present, the night that it happened. And I just really loved, I thought it was very genius the way all of this was created, all of the different characters and timelines. And it is so much about art and the importance of making it and the reason for art. It was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. If you were like me and you were initially turned away because it's a post-apocalyptic novel and like those are freaking everywhere now, no, this one is very different, and I definitely suggest picking it up. First sentence: "The king stood in a pool of blue light, unmoored." And probably my favorite book of the year was Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. This is a multi-generational story about family, immigration, and a little bit about sexual identity. So a lot of people don't like this book, and that's fine, and I understand it, but I feel like this is a book that was made for me. The focus on this book is on things that I enjoy, which is multi-generational stories, like I've mentioned, family drama, and just getting to see these lifespans chronicled in a story like this, and seeing the changing relationships of family and dynamics over time. I can definitely see if you're going into this book expecting some revelatory new perspective on gender or sexual identity, you're going to be really disappointed. This is just such a great novel. It's told in both the third and first person by the same character, because it's the main character basically telling the story of his life and telling his family history. And he actually isn't even born as a character until like way past halfway into this book. His story is not the main focus of the novel. And if you didn't know, he was born intersex and he was raised as a young girl, but then identifies as a man later on in life. And if like that was the thing drawing you into this book, you know, the focus isn't really so heavily on that. So I think a lot of people do tend to be disappointed because of that, because they go into this, you know, for that unique narrative. But like I said, it did have the multi-generational aspect about the grandparents migrating from Greece, and I thought it was just really interesting to see basically assimilation over generations and how each generation over time kind of loses a little bit of their native culture and assimilates to where they are. It was just absolutely fascinating. This took him like 10 years to write, and I thought it was worth it. And my favorite first sentence of the year: I was born twice. First, as a baby girl on a remarkably smogless Detroit day in January of 1960, and then again as a teenage boy in an emergency room near Petoskey, Michigan, in August of 1974. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Those were my favorite books of 2016. What were some of your favorites? Let me know if you read any of the books that I read this year and also enjoyed them. I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!